Hi there, Frontline Church family and friends. We are in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 10 to 21. It's Paul's advice, to use the words in verse 10, his advice on giving. And already Paul has celebrated publicly the Macedonian church for their giving. He's used them as an example and said, look at how they give like them, which is very un-British, isn't it? We're like, oh, we keep that to ourselves. It's a private matter. We even misquote scripture. Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. When Paul was happy to celebrate how people gave, name them for it. And Jesus himself at the temple said, look at how this widow gives, and compare that to how the Pharisees give. Just to quickly summarize this teaching on giving that spans chapter 8 and chapter 9. Chapter 8 verse 2, it is not based on personal circumstances. Verse 2, it's a joy to give, not a duty to give. Verse 4, it's a privilege to give. Verse 5, we give as unto the Lord. Verse 9, we become more like Jesus in our giving because it reflexes out of grace. So as grace abounds to us, giving reflexes out of it. Verse 7, we can grow in our giving. And I'll just pick up on verse 10 and 11 today. It starts with desire and has to be followed with action. Desire, intention, and action. And of course, if you've just got the action on its own without the desire and the willingness, then it's dry religious duty. This is not about a tax or a command. It reflexes out of relationship, joy, and the Spirit's work in our lives. If you're just giving out of action, there's no blessing in it, there's no life in it. But of course, if you just have the desire and not the action, well, that is, dare I say, worthless intention. It lacks integrity. We've then got this bit in verse 15 in the middle here where Paul, in challenging the church to give, goes back to some early biblical principles, and he's quoting from Exodus, and he's quoting about God's people in the wilderness where there was no food and no water, and yet God supernaturally provided for them. And each day he would provide manna for them. And I think it's important when Paul's reminding us of this to just take that a little bit further and go back to what we know of that story. It reminds us that God provides our daily needs. He is our provider. He will provide enough for today. But of course, the point was, if you remember the story, when they tried to hold on to it, store it up, keep hold of it for other days or hoard it, it got full of maggots, it rotted. And I think Paul's applying that to how we view our material wealth and how we view our possessions. If we hold on to it and hoard it, we lose it. Actually, it's more blessed to give than to receive. As we give, and we'll see this in later on in chapter 9, it's sowing seed that multiplies. It multiplies our resources. Just a couple more things then on giving in this passage. Someone once said to me, John, you're always talking about money. And I said to them, thank you, because, you know, this is what this passage is about 1 in 10 verses in the Gospels are Jesus talking about money, wealth, and possessions. We want to talk about what Jesus talks about. Paul talked about this to his church, the churches he oversaw. So verse 20, what happens is the gift that is collected is given to the leadership to administrate and distribute. And for me, that is a really important principle in my own giving. If I think, well, I'm going to give, let's say 10% for argument's sake, but I'm going to decide I'm going to give this to this group and this to that group and this to that group. What it really, as good as that is, I don't think that's biblical giving, because it doesn't flow out of surrender. It doesn't align us under the lordship of Jesus, where we say, here is my giving, and actually I entrust it to appointed leadership to distribute it according to how they discern. And that's what I think we're seeing in this passage and elsewhere in the New Testament. Of course, there is a challenge for leaders in that, and we see it in verse 21. They are really careful to be transparent, to be above board, that there's no place for accusation in their giving. They are committed to stewarding it well in the eyes of God and in the eyes of men. And I think how we handle money is part of our witness to the world as well, isn't it? And we've seen many examples where that's gone wrong. So I challenge you today just to review how you view money, review your giving, ask, does it line up to the words that we've read in yesterday's reading, in today's reading, in as we move through into chapter 9, and let's give out of a willingness and in line with Scripture. Have a wonderful day.